Welcome, and thank you for joining us as we honor and remember those affected by the attacks on September the 11th, 2001, and honor and remember and pay tribute to those who lost their lives that day, including more than 400 first responders, and those who lost their lives after the attacks due to illnesses and continued international conflict related to the attacks. I would also like to thank the men and women of the United States military for their service and their sacrifices that they made and continue to make so that you and I can experience the very freedoms that unite us here today as one people. A special thank you to the Newport News Police Foundation and Huntington Ingalls for their continuing support, which allows us to have ceremonies like this one. I would also like to recognize a few special guests who have joined us today. Vice Mayor Dr. Sandra Cherry, City Manager Ms. Cindy Rolfe, Assistant City Manager Bo Clayton, Robert Coleman, President of the Police Foundation and CEO of the Boys and Girls Club, and Colonel Kochiasu, Fort Eustis Garrison Commander. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for the presentation of colors by the Newport News Public Safety Honor Guard teams, followed by the singing of the national anthem by Mr. Rashawn Hiltz, followed by the Newport News Police Pipes and Drums Band.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we held at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
I now invite Newport News Police Department Chaplain Walter Satchel to deliver the invocation.
Good morning. Y'all can sit down. Thanks for each of you who are here this morning in memory of our fallen heroes and those heroes who are still living with us. Let's go to the Lord in prayer. Dear Lord, 21 years ago tomorrow, September the 11th, was seared in American memory. 19 men attacked us with a barbaric unequal to our nation's history. They murdered people of all colors, creeds, and nationalities, and made war upon the entire free world. Sadly, 9/11 has become the modern generation Pearl Harbor. Lord, on that awful day, we also witnessed something distinctly American. Ordinary citizens rising to the occasion and responding with extraordinary acts of heroism. Courage in office workers trapped on the high floors of burning skyscrapers, who called home so that their last words to their family would be of comfort and love. Bravery of the Pentagon staff who made it out of the flames and smoke and then ran back inside to answer cries for help. And we saw courage in passengers aboard Flight 93 who recited the 23rd Psalm and then charged the cockpit, saving an untold number of lives on the ground. Our Father, on this day we remember the innocent who lost their lives, and we pay tribute to those who gave their lives so that others might live. For many of our citizens, the wounds of that morning remain fresh. Firefighters and police officers still choke up at the memory of fallen comrades. Young children and teenagers still long for the parents who will never share the joy of their youth nor guide them to adulthood. Fellow Americans, take bitter pride in those who refused to be victims and gave America our first victory on the war on terror. Thank you for our freedom, Lord. We ask these things in your name. Amen.
Thank you, Chaplain Satchel. Newport News Mayor McKinley Price will now read the proclamation.
Good morning. Let me extend my sincerest gratitude to all of you for joining us this morning as we honor and remember our fallen heroes and the tragic loss of so many innocent lives 21 years ago. I have been asked to read the following proclamation as witness to today's ceremony. Whereas by joint resolution approved December 18, 2001, Public Law 107-89, Congress designated September the 11th of each year as Patriot Day in honor of the individuals who lost their lives on September 11, 2001. And whereas few events in history have shaped our nation and its citizens as the unprecedented attacks on American soil that Tuesday in 2001. And whereas the Newport News Police Department, the Newport News Fire Department, the Newport News Sheriff's Office, and the City of Newport News on this day honor the nearly 3,000 innocent lives taken from us on September the 11th, and all of those who so nobly aided their fellow citizens in America's time of need. We rededicate ourselves to the ideals that define our country and unite us as one. And whereas we pay tribute to the men and women who perished and those who continue to suffer and reflect on the bravery and courage of our police, fire, emergency, civilian, and military first responders for their quick and selfless action. And whereas it is also important to remember the countless families who were forever changed by the loss of a loved one because of these horrendous attacks. And whereas an honor of remembrance and ceremony on this day, September the 10th, 2022, is planned for all citizens of the City of Newport News. Now, therefore, I, McKinley L. Price, Mayor of the City of Newport News, do hereby proclaim September 11, 2022 as Patriot Day in the City of Newport News and urge the citizens of Newport News to join the Newport News Police Department, the Newport News Fire Department, and the Newport News Sheriff's Department office in supporting Patriot Day. Thank you.
It is now my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Captain Jessica Babolus. Captain Babolus Captain Babolus currently oversees the United States Capitol Police Capitol Division and is the commander of the Bicycle Response Unit. During her 23-year career, she has had the opportunity to work in many diverse assignments in both an operational and administrative capacity. She has served as the background investigator, motor unit commander, intelligence commander, public safety officer, and as an internal affairs investigator. She has a Bachelor of Science degree in criminal justice from Pace University. Because of Captain Babolus' close proximity to the Pentagon and the devastating effect it had on her nearby hometown, she has firsthand experience in regards to the events that occurred on September the 11th. Please help me welcome Captain Jessica Babolus.
Good morning. Thank you all so much for inviting me into your community today to speak about September 11th. It's something that's very near and dear to my heart, and it's amazing to see what your community has done to hold this event each year. Like all of you, September 11th was a day that had changed my life forever. It was a day of fear, it was a day of anger, it was a day of loss, and on reflection, it was a day of love. 21 years ago, I was a first responder outside of the United States Capitol building. I had recently graduated from college and moved to Washington, D.C. from a small commuter town in New Jersey. I wanted nothing more than to serve our nation and protect its greatest symbol of democracy. So while many of my friends and family were off to New York City to work, I had taken a different path. The morning of September 11th was a beautiful morning, and it began like most. When I arrived for roll call in the U.S. Capitol building, I had been told by my commander that I had needed to report down to the range for a qualification. Our range was 2 stories underground the Capitol complex. After completing my qualification course, a coworker came running in and said, "Turn on the TV, a plane just struck the World Trade Center." I was immediately shaken. My sister had been in New York City during the 1993 attack on the World Trade Center, and I recalled that hollow feeling of comforting my mother until we knew she was okay. My eyes were glued to the TV when the second plane hit the South Tower. I wanted to be home with my family in New Jersey. I thought of all of my friends and family who had gone to work that day in the financial district of Lower Manhattan, and I wanted more than anything to be there, to help with whatever came next. So I approached my supervisor and I asked if I can leave, and he agreed. After collecting my belongings and cleaning my weapon, a report came out that Flight 77 had just hit the Pentagon. I knew at that moment that our entire country was under attack. As we looked around the room at one another, my emotions left my body. There were no further discussions about going home to New Jersey. As I loaded my weapon, I recalled thinking, this is what I signed up to do. I need to get back to work. I was underground in a secure armory. There were no radio communications, and cell phone usage was limited. I was somehow able to call my mother and let her know that I was okay and exactly where I was. I couldn't give her any more or any less, but I knew that that was what she had needed to hear, that I was okay and where I was. The media was doing their best to report what was happening, but nobody truly knew. False reports had come out that the State Department had just been hit, and then that an aircraft was approaching the Senate wing of the U.S. Capitol. My peers and I strategized about what to do. Do we run out into the unknown, or do we remain underground? The fear of the unknown in a range and an armory was suffocating. After handing out several weapons to officers that were responding in, we all moved to the exterior of the building where we began evacuating congressional leaders. We were told by command that a plane was roughly 20 minutes out, headed inbound for the Capitol. We later learned this flight to be Flight 93. As we loaded and airlifted each congressional leader off the grounds, I kept looking back up at the dome and thinking, what happens if this gets hit? Will it collapse? Will it crumble? How will it fall? It's our greatest symbol of democracy. What do we do now? After the vibrations of the helicopters cleared, the panic radio calls slowed, and the hustling movement of people stopped, Capitol Hill was silent. While standing on the grounds, I noticed that one of my senior officers, who was a large, fit man and had always been a role model to me, had tears in his eyes. He explained to me that he had not yet made contact with his wife, who had been working in the Pentagon that day. The last words that they had spoken was that she had loved him, and then she went off to work. It had now been several hours with no contact. I had one of the few cell phones that day on Capitol Hill, and I handed it to him, and I remember saying, hold on to this as long as you need it, just till you can make contact, and eventually he did. Unsure of what to do next, we held a physical perimeter around the United States Capitol grounds until well into the night. When it was time to go home, my emotions hit. I was alone, and the future was unknown. Could we ever be okay? So many had senselessly lost their lives at the hands of evil. So many were suffering through their loss, and so many were just beginning to process what had happened and what was to come. I couldn't help but wonder how I would fit into this new world. As I drove past the Pentagon the next night, there was a sky full of smoke, and the destruction at the Pentagon was illuminated. Then, side by side to the destruction, was the largest American flag I had ever seen that had been draped by the firefighters and soldiers serving at the Pentagon. It gave me a sense of motivation, purpose, and hope. Within 2 days of 9/11, I was transferred to our intelligence division, where I served as a special agent for the next few years. While the work was challenging, coworkers and friends became family. The days were long, and the reality had settled in. The community had brought us more food than we could ever possibly eat. And you couldn't find a candle in any store nearby because of the amount of vigils that were being held. And flags were flown from every balcony and porch for as far as the eye can see. Everyone came together, and everyone helped. I swore to myself that day that I would never forget that day or time, not because I didn't want to, but because I needed to never forget. I needed to honor and pray for all of those who never made it home that day, the families who suffered and continue to suffer an unexplainable loss, those who ran into the unthinkable, and those who were activated and headed to war in the days that followed, and their families that continued to live life without them. I needed to honor the 40 passengers of Flight 93 who sacrificed their lives for mine. Mr. Rogers once explained that when he was a child and there were catastrophes on the news, his mother would tell him, look for the helpers. If you look for the helpers, you'll know that there's hope. Here we are, 21 years later, and we're asking ourselves that very same question. Will we be okay? We have to be okay. For the people who died that day, for those that have died on the battlefield defending our nation, and as well as for the children who have no choice but to be okay. We must look for the helpers and keep our promise to never forget 9/11. Thank you all.
We will now have remarks from Chief Johnson of the Newport News Fire Department, Sheriff Gabriel Morgan of the Newport News Sheriff's Office, and Chief Drew of the Newport News Police Department.
Good morning. I wish it was Steve following up after that. That was very meaningful for all of us. So, but I know you'll have plenty to say for us. So, all across this country this weekend, there's going to be these type of ceremonies in remembrance of what occurred. No matter how big or small a city, there is some remembrance going on, and that's the show and the willpower of the American people that we won't be deterred from living a life of freedom in the way we believe. There are so many things that go through the mind thinking about 9/11 and the time frame that has passed. Here we are, 21 years later, we're still having these ceremonies, we're still remembering this day. There's been lots of ceremonies for those that have passed during the terrible event, and then we've lost numerous firefighters and police officers and military who responded that day from health issues. We've lost a lot of military who went across seas to defend our freedom, and we can never forget that. It's very important for us. There's a tale that right after they unveiled the 9/11 memorial in New York City, a large group of firefighters, police officers, military, civilians, all that had actually been involved there at the towers, and a group of young students walked up to them and asked them, said, "Was it worth it?" And they all looked kind of at each other and shook their heads, and they looked back at them and said, "Yes, you were worth it." So never forget. Thank you.
Good morning. You've heard me speak about 9/11 many different times. And it's extremely personal for me. You heard Jessica talk about never forgetting. Heard the chief say, never forget. In the military, we have a saying, lest we forget. Lest we forget, according to Merriam-Webster Dictionary, is an idiom. It stands on its own. And it says, it should not be forgotten, lest we forget. Lest we forget that on September 11th, the attacks in New York City, Washington, D.C., Shanksville, Pennsylvania killed almost 3,000 people. Lest we forget, we all shared a sense of anguish as described by Jessica on September 11th following the attacks. She also described that we had this overwhelming and rare, I must admit, spirit of unity. This country came together. A couple weeks later, about 3 weeks, in October, the U.S. and our allies responded to the attacks of 9/11 with airstrikes on Al-Qaeda and the Taliban positions in Afghanistan. At that time, 79% of all Americans reported that they displayed the American flag. And Jessica, again, described what she saw, where when she looked out over Arlington and the district, flags were everywhere. 79%. 62% said that they felt patriotic because of the events of 9/11. Lest we forget. We managed to put our political differences and supported our government and our governmental institutions like the military, fire, police, the FBI, the intelligence community. We also supported our political leaders. This was evidenced by the fact that in October of 2021, 60% of adults expressed trust in the federal government, a pinnacle not seen for more than 30 years. Lest we forget. Some institutions like the media receive record high ratings for professionalism. Around 7 in 10 adults, 69%, said the media stood up for America, while 60% said they protected our democracy. Lest we forget. Our president at the time, George Bush, who came into office after a heavily contested election. How many of y'all remember that? Heavily contested election. He had 35% approval rating before 9/11. After 9/11, he had an 86% approval rating. Lest we forget. Since 9/11, we have had a layer of defense in this country. And that layer of defense relies heavily on human intelligence. And for those of you who don't know what human intelligence is, it's basically people. It's human intelligence. We didn't have a lot of sources, if you will, previous to 9/11. Today we do. So since 9/11, what have we seen as far as a threat to this country? The number of people killed in deadly attacks since 9/11 by ideology are 122 deaths by far right-wing ideology, 107 by jihadists, 17 by misogynistic and incel ideology, 12 by black supremacy, nationalist or supremacy, and 1 by far left wing. Why do I say that? When we look at the threat to this country, the threat to this country is different. It's emerging. The use of social media has made it difficult for us to identify and protect against some of the threat. We have been unable to slow the spread of false information and hatred because of social media and end-to-end encryption. In the law enforcement community, our job to protect America has gotten so incredibly difficult. But yet, every day, and thank you, Jessica, and thank you to everyone at the Capitol for the job that you guys have done. You held the line. You never forgot. And you followed your oath. In closing, Rosamund Hunt, a senior writer for the World Economist, wrote, "From the collapse of ancient Rome to the fall of the Mayan Empire, evidence from archaeology suggests that 5 factors almost invariably been involved in the loss of civilization. 1, the uncontrollable population movement, new epidemic and diseases, failing states leading to increased warfare, collapse of trade routes leading to famine, and climate change." So as we continue to say never forget, I leave you with those thoughts and say, lest we forget.
Well, good morning and early afternoon to everyone. I'm going to be brief today. We heard some very compelling stories and real-life testimonies. I want to thank you, Jessica, for making the trip and for your service. To hear from you and Jeff and Gabe, our mayor. Behind me is our monument, right where our city council, our form of government. To my left is a monument of where we have names of men and women who have paid the ultimate sacrifice, who have given their life serving the citizens of this great city. 21 years ago, most of us who are of age remember where we were at when we saw smoke go across our TV screens. You're going to hear from some high school students who are here today. What was 9/11? We may see it or hear about it on a documentary. But to go through it and live it and remember those moments, they're always etched in our heart. The men and women in our United States military that continue to fight the war against those that wish to hurt other peoples or lands or nations, our own country. Those that have, and I pray never do, but by statistics, we know that others will give their life in service. Those that wear uniform are called to respond to some of the most critical situations. But I would say what unites all of them, all of us, is a heart of service. That we want to make things better for those that live in our communities, those that we serve. I think of our own situations here in this city of Newport News, situations that we, Sheriff's Office, the Fire Department, the Police Department, have all responded to. Why do we do that? Running to situations as others may run away from. And it's not always huge events. We just had a high school football game Thursday and Friday night. Large crowds came to Todd Stadium. We brought officers in, and the Sheriff's Department, even some firemen, Jeff, helped us. At the end of that game, getting large crowds out, and I bring that up only for this. There was an email waiting for me Friday morning from an individual I've never met. And she was from another area, and she wrote in and she said, "Chief, I just want to thank your city and the men and women who helped us get in, watch our kids play, and leave safely from your city." I bring that up because it matters to people. Safety is on the hearts and minds of people. You can see things going across our country, this nation. A heart of service. In our city, not too far from here, we build the greatest ships in the world that are often used not only to defend America, but to defend others. Those that lost their lives in 9/11, those that will continue to lose their lives in our military and police and fire, our sheriff's organizations. We all know what we sign up for and why we put this uniform on. Now, I'm not going to mention Jessica. I know Jeff and Gabe and myself where we're at in our careers. But in the audience are fire recruits and police recruits, the future of what will serve this city, will serve our country. Langley, Fort Eustis, the Naval Weapons Station, serve the men and women that are under your command. That some of us here know what it's like to carry that burden to make sure that we protect them and appreciate what they do. I appreciate all of you that came today. I appreciate the recruits that are going to take on the next generation. I don't know what challenges you will face. But if you're like Jessica, if you're like Jessica and others, whether you're on a plane, what you respond to, what you're called to respond to, and what sacrifices you are asked to give, I want to thank you ahead of time. And know that citizens appreciate what you do. You may not always see it. You may not always see it. You may not always know it, but I'm telling you, they appreciate you. And it matters. What you do, what all of you do, matters. It makes a difference. I will close with this. I am honored to work with great men, great women. I thank our city manager for giving me the opportunity to serve this city. Because it matters. The real heroes of 9/11 are not just those that ran upstairs or continue to serve or have died afterwards. The real heroes of 21 years ago are our citizens in this country. We're all Americans. And that is our greatest resolve. Thank you all for being here today. Thank you.
We will now have the tolling of the bell, reading of the timeline by 3 of our young adult police commissioners, and the wreath presentation by honor guard members and a veteran from each of our Newport News public safety departments.
On September 11, 2001, at 8:46 a.m., hijackers aboard American Airlines Flight 11 crashed into floors 93 through 99 of the North Tower of the World Trade Center in New York City, killing everyone on board and hundreds inside the building. 57 minutes later, hijackers aboard United Airlines Flight 175 crashed into floors 65 through 85 of the World Trade Center, killing everyone on board and hundreds in the building. On September 11, 2001, at 9:37 a.m., hijackers aboard American Airlines Flight 77 crashed the plane into the western facade of the Pentagon in Washington, D.C., killing 59 on board the plane and 125 military and civilian personnel inside the building.
On September 11th at approximately 10:07 a.m., hijackers on United Airlines Flight 93 crashed the plane into a field in Somerset County, Pennsylvania, killing all 40 passengers and the crew aboard.
The tolling of the bell. Long before telephones and radios, fire departments used the telegraph to communicate. When the handle was pulled on the once familiar red fire alarm boxes found on nearly every street corner of America, a special code was transmitted to every fire station. When a firefighter died in the line of duty, the fire alarm office would tap out a special signal. That signal was 5 measured dashes, then a pause, then 5 measured dashes, another pause, then 5 more dashes. This became universally known as the tolling of the bells and was broadcast over all telegraph fire alarm circuits. This signal was a signal of honor and respect for all firefighters who had made the ultimate sacrifice and has become a time-honored tradition.
Please rise for the rendering of honors. I now invite Newport News Fire Chaplain Tom Schneer to deliver the benediction.
Good morning. My name is Thomas Schneer, and I'm the chaplain with the Newport News Fire Department. So my benediction's a little bit different. This morning we come together to remember and celebrate and honor what happened 21 years ago on September 11th, 2001, where 2,996 people were killed and another 10,000 were injured. The scriptures came to life that day when in 1 John 5:13 it says that there is no greater sacrifice than one friend laying down his life for another. We have all have our own memories of that day and its aftermath. If you're like me, you still have a jolt of pain when you see the Twin Towers in a movie or in photos. That day we lost 343 firefighters and paramedics, 37 police officers of the New York Port Authority, 27 police officers of the New York Police Department, 1 patrolman for the New York Fire Patrol, 189 military and civilians at the Pentagon, and 44 people on Flight 93 that crashed in Pennsylvania. All these numbers have names, and the names belong to families in which their children now are between 21 and 40 plus years old. To remember that these names are a collection of people of all colors, religions, political persuasions, age, beliefs. They were Americans. They were taken from us that day and their families. We remember them, their families, their survivors, their stories, the lives that were lost. Dispatchers, firefighters, law enforcement, EMS personnel, Port Authority officers, and all the branches of our military all have a brotherhood, including our sisters. It is nothing that you can ever explain. Hard as you may try, you have to experience firsthand. It is a calling. Remember how the world reacted that day? Remember millions of human beings came together to share in grief and to state, "This shall not stand." This is what the meaning of brotherhood is. Being a chaplain is a privilege in a way that I can honor the brothers and sisters that died on that horrible day. I made a commitment. The reason is simple. It is the golden rule. Luke 6:31 says, "Do unto others as you would wish to be done with you." As you had heard the stories about the tragedies and triumphs of September 11th through the service, please remember one thing. God tells us in the book of Deuteronomy 4:9, "Only be careful and watch yourselves closely, so that you do not forget the things your eyes have seen or let them fade from your heart as long as you live. Teach them to your children and to their children after them." Every day there are thousands of dispatchers, emergency responders, Port Authority personnel, military personnel, and their families across the country that are ready in a second notice to make that same sacrifice that was made 21 years ago. They are ready to help the perfect stranger at any time of the day, always ready to rush to help someone, quite possibly whom they have never met on the worst day of their lives. They are ready to rush into danger to do their best to save someone, even at the cost of possibly losing their own lives. There is a very simple saying that is the very base of our emergency responder and military training, and it is echoed through their lives: risk a lot to save a lot. These men and women train very hard and to be the very best when things have gone bad. We should not take their dedication lightly because their career is not easy. It takes a lot of time away from their loved ones so that they can be here to help our loved ones. True heroes in the emergency service fields in our military do not get into this field for the glory. They get into and excel in the career they chose because deep down inside, they want to help people. They would give all they have that one single person may be able to, once again, hold their loved one and say, "I love you." The first official casualty of September 11th was New York Fire Chaplain Mikhail Judge. At 68, clad in his white fire helmet and black coat, he remained in the lobby and mezzanine of the Trade Center's North Tower, praying for firefighters who rushed past him to go up the stairs of the wounded building to help people get out. When the nearby South Tower collapsed, Chaplain Judge was killed by a tsunami of rubble that bursted into the North Tower lobby. Chaplain Judge's prayer has become well known since his death. Lord, take me where you want me to go. Let me meet who you want me to meet. Tell me what you want me to say. And Lord, please keep me out of the way. I pray that this memorial service will remind all of us of the loss of innocent life that day and of the bravery, the duty, the self-sacrifice, and the importance of community and common humanity. Edmund Burke said it best: the only thing necessary for a triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. It is up to each and every one of us every day to do what we can do to see that this is happening in our own community. Thank you all for being here, and may the Lord protect you all and your families. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
This concludes our ceremony. Thank you for coming.